Good morning and welcome to class 29 of Developmental Psychology, Psych 250 for the NDSU Summer 2017 semester. It's our last lecture. It's probably the last time we'll interact together in terms of the class. Now, there's always a possibility that I'll see you at the review tomorrow, or we'll interact in some other way. But I just wanted to start the class by saying I've really enjoyed getting to know all of you this semester, and I hope that you've learned a lot in this class, and I hope that it's been valuable for you and valuable for your future endeavors as human services professionals. So. It's sort of bittersweet. This is the last lecture I'll give at NDSU, so it's a little bit sad, but I am glad that we had this time together this summer, and I really enjoyed getting to know all of you. Um, Looking at our week, so tomorrow we do not have class on campus. Um, what you need to do tomorrow during class time is do your peer review if you haven't already done it, and also study for the final. We will have an exam review tomorrow night from 5 to 6 on Google Hangouts. So if you need instructions about how to do that, just go to the exam page on Blackboard and look for the exam review um, Google Hangout link and instructions that are in the final exam folder. So that folder should be available to you now. Let me just double check. I think I got it. Yeah, it's available. Um, Yeah, so if you've never done Google Hangouts before, there's a link on the Join the Review Online module on Blackboard. Go to that and just see how to do it, because if you've never done it before, it can be kind of confusing. So it's not hard once you figure it out, but you do have to download a free plugin for your computer, so it's better to just go ahead and get that done prior. Now, your quiz will become available for the quiz for this week, and last week's material will be available at noon today. That is due Friday at 11:59 p.m. Tonight at 11:59 p.m., your essays are due. And only one person hasn't turned their essay in yet, so for most of you, you don't even have to worry about that. If you're the one student who hasn't, that's fine. You have until 11:59 p.m. to do that. The sooner the better, because I can get your essay off to your peer reviewer and I can get their essay to you, so you can get that done quicker. Tomorrow, like I said, you have your peer review that you need to do for class. It shouldn't take you more than like 20 minutes. So use the remaining time to study. Be sure to get that to me as soon as you can. It is due at 11:59 tomorrow, but if you can get it done before then, that would be amazing, because then that gives your classmates more time to revise, resubmit. Now, I will send you, as soon as I get your peer review back, the one that you completed and the one that was completed on your paper, I will send you your peer review results. So what you need to do is look at the two and see what feedback you get, and then if you want to revise, you can. Now this is how I've decided to assign your grade. If your peer gives you a higher grade, so say your peer gives you a grade of 23, and then I give you a grade of 22, what I will do is I will give you a grade of 20. If you do not revise and resubmit, I will give you a grade of 22.5. I'll give you the average. Now, if it's the other way around, I gave you a 23 and they give you a 22, then I'll give you a 23. So it's always going to go higher. Like if I'm higher, you're going to go higher. Or if I'm higher, you're going to get my grade. If the peer is higher, then I'm more knowledgeable about this, so my grade is probably more accurate, but I'm going to give you the composite of the two. If or the average of the two. Now, if you revise and resubmit, you are able to get an even higher grade. So it's up to you. If you want to revise, you have until Saturday, Saturday the 29th at 11:59 p.m. to do that. At midnight on Sunday, I probably will still be awake because I usually don't go to bed till about 1 in the morning. I will put whatever grade you get on Blackboard. So you have to have it in before then. So just putting that out there. So it is good. It's very good if you can get this done. If you start doing this today, if you get your if you get your peer review stuff back, it's important that you start working on it as soon as possible. That's why I'm really trying to get everyone's stuff back to them quicker so that you have more than just one day to do the revisions. But really, it's a one-page essay, and so far the revisions I've suggested are not unreasonable to be completed in like 30, 40 minutes. Then Friday we have our final exam. The final exam is online. It's not on campus. It's just like the midterm. It'll be available to you Thursday night at 11:59 p.m. and will run until Friday night at 11:59 p.m. So you have 24 hours to complete it, 80 minutes. Once you start, the clock starts and does not stop. Even if you leave it, it doesn't stop. It keeps running. But um, you can go away and come back if you need to, but the clock will still be running, and it'll auto submit after 80 minutes. So there is an essay. There are 40 or 45 short answer questions, or sorry, multiple choice questions. Like short answer, no multiple choice. It's just like the midterm. Mm-hmm. I think it's 45 multiple choice questions and a 5-point essay. That sounds like something I would do. So that's what it will be. So if you have questions about that, you can submit it on the exam review board, or you can bring the questions with you to the review on tomorrow night. Um, so that's what you have to do then. Remember that your quiz is due Friday, so make sure you do that. Your discussion board is due Friday at 11:59 p.m. So my advice is to just do it today. Just get it knocked out so that you don't have to worry about it, so that you can spend Thursday preparing for the final, then you can spend Friday revising. So just that's my advice. I will give you until Monday the 31st to submit anything that you haven't submitted. Um, I will take points off, obviously, if it's late, but it's actually 11:59 a.m. It should say on the syllabus. So that's when I'm putting the grades in by then, and then I'm leaving here at 1 o'clock. So, and I'll not be back. So you have to get it in by then. Reminder about SONA. Please email me the SONA points that you got, if you got any. If you want to do the optional essay instead, that's also due. Both of those by 11:59 on Saturday. Um, Same with the movie review and the safe zone. And I'll send an email with all of this on it after class. But I just wanted to make sure that we touched base together in class. The other thing I wanted to bring up is several of you were unclear about how to submit your papers, so I want to just go over that really fast. Um, so I'm going to pull this up. Okay, I don't want to do that. Okay, so if you go, to the course Blackboard, okay, so you go to the course Blackboard, and you come down to projects, and you go to the Part 3 folder. The Part 3 folder says it contains the submission portal for the final draft. So you go into Part 3, and then all you have to do is click on this. And you can either copy and paste your submission in here, which I don't recommend because it's wonky for me to read. It's better if you attach it, so just browse my computer, you pick your file, it adds it, and then click this, please. Now notice it only accepts files in doc, docx, docm, so this is Windows, Microsoft Word 98 to 2003. This is everything, any other Microsoft Word. This is Microsoft Word for Mac computers, PowerPoint. Um, these are PowerPoint files. I don't know what that is. That's a text file. I don't know what that is. PDF and HTML. So um, make sure that your file, the end of your thing says this, okay? So something like this right here is the file type. So look at that and make sure that it's on here. Otherwise, when I go to grade your paper, I'm going to get an error and I'm not going to be able to grade it, and it's going to be irritating for all of us because it's going to delay me getting your stuff done, and I'm going to have to email you and be like, please, please, please send this to me. It's a pain. So far, I've not had that. I've only had that problem once this semester, but just please be mindful of that because it really delays things. And then if you want instructions about the revise and resubmit, you can go here and you get the instructions. But I'm sending you the instructions and by email, so you really don't even have to go in this folder. Now, if you do resubmit, just resubmit through the portal. You can submit 2 times on this, so just resubmit here. Again, don't email it to me. Please send it through here because it scans it to make sure you haven't plagiarized it. Not that you have, but I just have to do it because it's what the university prefers. Okay. I think that's everything. Gosh, 10 minutes of paperwork. Okay. Alright, so let's get started. So today we're talking about, and I think it's a very appropriate class since it's our very last one. Um, just okay. Today we're talking about the end of life. We're talking about literally the last stage of development, or the last part of development, and that is the end of it. And I think it's very appropriate that this is our last class um, because this is the end of our development together as developmental psychologists in training. And so yeah, it's always a hard class to do. Now, I want to preface this by saying I understand that this can be a hard topic for a lot of people, especially if you've recently lost someone that you really care about. If you need to pause and take a break, you can. If you need to just not do this lecture at all, that's also fine. In terms of the exam questions, um, I'm going to just post the complete slides on Blackboard, so you don't even have to worry about taking notes today. So if you just can't do this, if you don't want to listen to this, that's fine. Perfectly understand. It's perfectly fine. I completely understand. This can be really hard for people to talk about because we do talk about what death is like. So just I wanted to put that out there. If you need to not do this lecture, you don't have to, because there won't be very many questions on the exam from this lecture and or on the quiz. Um, and the answers would be very easy to get just looking at the completed slides. So don't worry about it if you can't do it. So let's get started. Death occurs in 3 distinct parts. Um, it's not it's not just a single thing. It's sort of like birth, right? Birth happens in three, or what's it, 3 stages? I think it's 3 stages. Gosh, I can't remember now. I don't know. For the sake of argument, let's say it's 3 stages. I can't remember. I'm so tired. But death is divided into 3 parts. The first is the agonal phase. Agonal being agony. So this is the painful part of death. And this is when you have gasps and muscle spasms and the heartbeat starts to disintegrate. It starts to stop. Um, doesn't last incredibly long, but it is definitely one of the longer parts of death, or of the 3 parts. It's the longest part. Well, I guess number 3 would be the longest because it's forever. But clinical death is the second phase, and this is when your heartbeat, circulation, breathing, and brain functioning stop. Now, it's clinical death because technically you can resuscitate someone. If the heartbeat stops, circulation stops, breathing stops, brain functioning starts, you can still resuscitate. You can't resuscitate brain functioning, but you can get the heart going again. You can get the circulation going through the means of artificial devices. So it is still possible for someone to be resuscitated. Now, um, in some instances, brain functioning can resume. It just depends on if it's brain death or not. If it's only been like a second or two, or maybe even less than a minute, you could still revive someone, because if blood flow is resumed within 13 minutes, there's not permanent brain damage. But it all depends on a lot of different factors. The third part is mortality, and this is permanent death. There's no way to resuscitate at this point, and the person appears shrunken. And you'll notice, like when you if you go to a visitation and you know look at the person in their casket, they look smaller. And it's true because what happens is stops circulating, and so we lose some of our volume as a human being, and our skin loses its elasticity. Everything just kind of like all the fluid starts to like settle towards the bottom, so everything just kind of starts to shrink in. So it's not you're not eyes aren't playing tricks on you. Literally do appear sunken or shrunken. Now it's hard defining death, and people it's sort of the same way that we have a hard time defining what life is. We have the same difficulty in defining when people are dead, or considered dead. Traditionally, we have defined death as the absence of a natural heartbeat and respiration. So in other words, if your heart's not beating and you're not breathing naturally on your own, then you're dead. But in the 21st century, with all of our artificial life support technologies, it that's not really a good definition because you can maintain life in the sense that you can maintain a person's blood flow and respiration and basic functions. That's not a good definition of death. It's not a good definition of life either, but it definitely calls into question whether or not having a heartbeat and having breath is definition of life. So today we tend to define death as brain death, meaning there's irreversible cessation of all activity in the brain and the brainstem. In other words, there's no firing, no neurons are firing, there's no electrical activity in your brain, and at that point you're considered dead because there's no way that you could ever possibly sustain life on your own. So this is mortality. This is beyond the clinical death. There's no possible way to revive someone, um, or to revive their brain activity. Now, when we talk about the brain, there are two parts, and we went over this in the first couple weeks of class. But the brain has the cerebral cortex, which is the bigger part that we typically think of when we think of the brain, and then the brainstem. And the brainstem it's called the hindbrain, and it's sort of a tinier version of the bigger brain, and it is where a lot of our basic functions are controlled. Our breathing, our heartbeat, all that is controlled from here. And so there's a third category of death, which is called a persistent vegetative state. And this is when the all activity here stops. And so this is where emotion, thought, perception, vision, hearing, all that is controlled right here. But our basic activities in the in the brainstem are still active. So we're still having our basic functions are being maintained. So there's no activity here, but there's still activity here. In other words, the shop's closed for business, but the employees are still there in the back room working on closing up the rest of the store. So that is considered a persistent vegetative state because you're able to sustain life natural life support, breathing, heart rate, circulation, etc. But you're not ever going to be able to be the same person that you are. Not going to be able to think anymore or have emotions or anything. So that's death from the perspective of the person who dies. What about well, and this also, I mean, this can apply to people who are dying too. So I guess hold your horses there, Darcy. So the way that we react to death is pretty predictable. Um, We all have, it's normal and natural and healthy to have what's called death anxiety, and this is a fear and apprehension of death. In other words, we feel scared, we feel anxious about the unknown that is death. We are apprehensive of it. Is it the end of is it the end of all meaning? Is it just the beginning of like what's really true? Um, if you're religious, there are the other questions. Did I do everything right? Am I going to go to heaven? Am I going to go to hell? That can be very anxiety provoking for a lot of people. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross came up with 5 stages of grief, um, and this is largely applied to death, and then also it can be applied to losing someone, like not but through death, but just socially and emotionally. The first is denial. And I want to point out that while these are called stages, research has actually shown that you can go through these in different orders. Like obviously acceptance is going to always be at the end, but the rest of these, like you don't feel them and you aren't necessarily going to go through them in the same order, and you can go through one stage and go to the next and then come back. So they're kind of like experiences. I think they're better to say there's experiences of grief that occur um, in certain different orders at different times in a repetitive way. You might even skip some steps. Um, so just think of these as more of experiences that people typically go through. The first is denial. And this is a refusal to accept reality. I'm not really going to die. It's okay. This is just a scare. They're going to find some kind of cure. It's going to be okay. Like, this isn't really happening to me. The second is anger, and this is frustration at loss or stolen time. And a lot of times, people who are dying, or people who have a loved one who's dying, or people who've lost someone to this also happens if you lose someone. So, say one of your friends or family members dies, and you're like, no, they didn't. You're kidding me. This didn't happen. This didn't really happen. It was somebody else. And you'll see this a lot of times. If there's ambiguity over like identifying the remains of a person, the family will be like, we still have hope that they're out there. This is not them. Someone stole their car, or someone like it's somebody else, etc. Um, and so this is denial, refusal to accept what you really know to be true. The second is anger, and this is getting upset and frustrated that this has happened. Um, it's usually not violent, but people will just like. Usually, what happens is people are in denial, and then they they realize that there's really no hope left, and then they get angry and they get frustrated, and they like might yell or punch something or just feel intense anger. Um, People who are dying will get angry. Like, I had a friend who died from cancer. It was lung. She had lung cancer. She didn't smoke. She'd never smoked. She was very healthy. She went to the gym. She like ate a healthy diet, and she was angry. She was like, "Why? I did everything right, and I still got lung cancer. Like, what the hell?" Um, The next is bargaining, and these are futile attempts to stop the inevitable. So if you're dying, this could be like, for example, my friend when she was diagnosed, she had stage 4 lung cancer. At that point, there's nothing you can do. It's too developed at this point to really. I mean, it will kill you. The treatment would kill you if the cancer didn't. Is basically where she was. And so her futile attempt to stop the inevitable was trying alternative medicines, which did prolong her life, but it was not a good quality of. She didn't have a good quality of life. It was pretty awful to watch. Um, if you've lost someone, bargaining could be. It's harder if you've lost someone. It's easier like if you're like going through a breakup. You could say bargaining would be, well, I'll change or I'll do what you want or whatever. But when you've lost someone and someone has died, like it's harder to bargain. Um, but it still happens if you've lost someone. Maybe you're pleading with God, you know, make this all go away. Please make this all go away. I'll do anything. Then depression. Depression is the realization that nothing can be done. In other words, you've accepted that this has happened. Um, You've been angry about it. You've bargained. You've tried to get out of it, and you realize that you have no hope of fixing this. You're either going to die or you've lost this person. It's over. And you get really depressed, and this can last anywhere from a couple days to 2 months or more. But we don't want it to last more than 2 months. And then the last stage is acceptance, and this is yielding peacefully and quietly to the inevitable. In other words, you just kind of come to this place where you're like, it happened. I can't change it. I don't like it, but it is what it is, and that's all I can say about it. And it sort of is like falling in love. It's not something that you plan or attempt. It just one day it just happens. You come to acceptance, and you're like, I don't like this, but it is what it is. And I'm at peace with the fact that this is happening. I'm not happy about it, but I'm at peace. And that's the thing about it. Acceptance doesn't mean that you're okay with it. It doesn't mean that you like it. It doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt you still. It just means that you are no longer in turmoil over it. You're like, this is happening. I can't do anything about it. Bereavement. So now let's move to the perspective of the person who has lost someone to death. Bereavement is the experience of losing a loved one, and it's a very normal part of death, and it lasts about 2 months. Anything after 2 months becomes a clinical disorder. And there are different components of bereavement. And I'm going to go out of order here. The first type is anticipatory grieving. And this happens when you know someone is going to die. You have a loved one who's terminally ill. You have a loved one who's in a car accident. They survived the initial impact, but they're not going to make it. You have a loved one who's very ill. You know that they're gonna die. And so you can go through anticipatory grieving, and you can go through all of these stages right here as part of that anticipatory grieving before the fact. My friend, it took her 8 months to die. And so by the time she had died, I didn't really feel any grief because I'd already grieved enough. I like grieved for 8 months over this. I mean, at her funeral, I did break down and cry, and it was really hard. But um, a lot of times when you have a drawn out death, people get their grieving out of the way beforehand, and then post mortem for them is really just coming to acceptance and just coming to peace that it's finally over. Um, Now, if you don't know that someone is going to die, then what you end up going through is just ordinary, plain old ordinary grief. And this is intense physical and emotional distress. So anticipatory grieving is identical to grief, it's just that this happens before the death occurs. This happens after death, and it's intense physical and emotional distress. When you go through grief at a loss, you feel physically sick. You feel like your stomach is being ripped out of you. You could go numb sometimes. You feel dizzy. You can feel breathless. Um, the world can spin. I mean, your body reacts in such a negative way. And what's happening is your brain is going through a million different neurons are responding in the same time, and it makes you physically sick. That's what's really happening. It's not that your stomach knows anything as bad is happening. It's that all of the all of the all of the things in your brain that tell you what's going on are like going haywire because you're you're completely shaken by what's happened. Um, Grief is very intense. It's hard. It's hard to go through. Mourning is different than grief. And we often use the two interchangeably, but it's actually different. Grief is a feeling, mourning is a practice. Mourning is a culturally defined expression of grief. So in white Southern culture, for example, um, traditionally speaking, mourning is something that is intensely private. It's family and close friends typically are invited to the awake or visitation, I think is what people commonly call it now. It's typically something that you do. You're expected to, in public, be pretty controlled, but demonstrate that you're sad. So people wear black. Um, you still try to be very gracious. You still try to be a good hostess, even if you've just lost your spouse. Typically, in Southern culture, family comes in and they support the person who's lost someone. So, like for example, um, when my friend died, her her cousins were really there, and they helped her widower, and her children deal with the loss. And close friends too are part of that process as well. I was one of her close friends. I ran her business for her, and so I stepped in and made decisions about the business in the couple of days before and after her death. So that's typically what's done in Southern culture. Now, if you need to like let it all grow and cry, a lot of times people in the South do that in private. Like for me, I'm intensely private about my mourning. I like to, if I cry, I like to cry in my bedroom without anyone around because that's just how I've been raised. Now, Black Southern culture is completely different. So in white Southern culture, it's pretty private. The funeral happens. Typically, what happens, you have the visitation the day after death or 2 days after death, and the funeral is the day after the visitation. Typically, someone dies in the South, they're buried pretty quickly. Um, Black Southern culture is completely different. It's fascinating, from a cultural studies perspective. It is a week to 2 week long thing. It is very public. It is very public displays of grief. You honor the dead by dressing in your finest clothes, by showing a lot of public grief, a lot of mourning. Funerals are long and they're celebrations. It's it's a beautiful thing, but it lasts for a much longer period of time. I'm not really sure how people here. I've only been to one funeral in North Dakota, and I wasn't intimately acquainted with the deceased. I knew them as a colleague, but I didn't really I wasn't on the inner circle, so I didn't really know like how the experience of grief was for people. But from what I've noticed, just from my people in my church, like funerals in my church, it seems to last. The process seems to last a little bit longer. Like it doesn't seem like people, have their funeral or get buried as quickly as they do in the South. So I don't know if it's different. I don't know if people here. I feel like people here would be very private about their grief just because that's how North Dakotans are, but I'm not sure. I really don't know what the practice is here. Grief has a very specific process. Um, and so typically what happens, and this is different than the stages of grief. So these are the different experiences, but this is the actual psychological process that happens. Um, and it happens in this order. The first is avoidance. Shock, disbelief, numbness. This is the first initial knee-jerk reaction to being told that you've lost someone. It can last anywhere from a couple minutes to a couple hours to a couple days. Um, for some people, this happens, especially in the South, where we're very constrained in our public displays of emotion. Um, this could happen. Avoidance could last until after the funeral, where you're just in shock and you're just in disbelief and you're numb. You're like you don't really feel anything. You're just kind of walking through. It's like you're a ghost. You're just walking through life. You don't really know what's going on. That's the avoidance part of grief. Then, after the shock and the disbelief and the numbness wears off, you go through confrontation. And this is when you have cascades of intense emotional reactions. You're feeling a lot of different things in a lot of different ways. Intense sadness, anger, guilt is very common, frustration, um, you can be disdainful, hate people. You're basically you've had all of these emotions that you've been experiencing throughout the time you were in avoidance that you haven't been cognizant of, and suddenly the avoidance comes off. It's like you have a mask on and it comes off, and suddenly you see all of these different emotions that you've been processing for days. And they all hit you at one time, and so that can be really frustrating, but also really overwhelming. And then restoration is the last part of the process. And this is adjustment to the loss and related stress. You just kind of get to the point where you move on. So I mean, avoidance kind of encompasses the experiences, the Kubler-Ross stages of like denial, bargaining, and then anger, depression is sort of that second stage, the confrontation, and then acceptance. So that can all happen then. That can all happen as part of this process. All right, I think that's everything. I just want to make sure. Yep, that's it. Well, I want to thank you for your attention this semester. Like I said, I've really enjoyed getting to know all of you, getting to work with you. I've enjoyed reading your discussion posts and your essays on your quizzes and your exams and then your project essays. I've been very impressed with your work. I have to admit, I've never taught an online class before. I was not looking forward to it. I did not think it was going to be very good, and you proved me wrong, and I like being proved wrong. And so I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for this experience. It's been wonderful. Um, I am here if you need me, even though I'm leaving. I'm still available to help you if you want advice or have career questions or need a reference. My email is darcy.corbett, Corbitt, at Auburn, AUBURN.edu. That's my new email address, and I'll send that out by email. But even though I'm leaving, I'm still available. I won't be on campus, but I am still available to you. Um, for your last discussion post, I'd like for you to just write a reflection on the course. What did you learn this semester? What do you wish you had learned? And what do you think was the most important thing you learned this semester? This is just a way for me to see how you felt about the class and what you thought was important about the class, things that you wish that we'd gone over. You could even put out things that you wish that we hadn't gone over, or things that you wish I had done differently. That's fine too. Now remember, it's not anonymous. It'll be there for everyone to see, but it won't affect your grade. I am genuinely interested in like in how you grew in this course and what you got from it. So just let me know. If you don't want to post that, you can you can just say something very general for the reflection, like for the points, but if you want to send me something more detailed, you can do that if you want it to be private. All right, so that's your discussion for today. I look forward to reading those. The ones I got last semester were really good. Helped me evaluate my teaching, helped me to see what people liked and didn't like about the course. I think only a couple people said there were things that they didn't like, but so I would appreciate if you did that. And of course, you'll get your point. Um, in terms of the final, look at the study guide, look at your notes, your chapter summaries, think about what do you not understand about any of that material and ask questions on the discussion board. Remember, we have an exam review tomorrow from 5 to 6 on Google Hangouts, and that your essay is due tonight at 11:59 p.m. So let me know if you have any questions, comments, or concerns at darcy.corbitt, Corbitt, hall, Hall, at ndsu.edu, and I will be happy to answer them. I'll see you tomorrow at the review, and if I don't see you tomorrow, if I don't ever see you again, I wish you all the best. I look forward to hearing about the wonderful things that you're doing to make the world a better place. And just know that I'm always here if you need me. All right? I'll talk to you later.